Hello, and welcome to the Marine Tales.
Today we have with us two Jewish immigrants that left Germany before the war, with fear of being killed by the Nazi regime. Welcome Dominique and Oscar.
Thank you for having us. We are very happy to be here.
It's been a long way, but we're finally here and safe.
Tell us a little bit about your story before you came to Ecuador. You came together, right?
Yes, we didn't know each other in Germany, but we met on the way here.
Around the 1930s, life was great. I live in the city, in a shuttle with my family and friends, where I practiced athletics and won many championships around the country. We were just like everybody else, and had the same rights. But around 1933, people started to treat us different. They blamed us for the loss of Germany in World War I, and there were many anti-Semitic campaigns all around the country.
Yes, those times were very hard. I instead lived in a small village outside of Germany. I had a big farm and a very large field where I helped my parents grow vegetables to sell. I had never been to the city before I decided to leave Europe and come here.
Then I imagine that you kept your Jewish roots. Did you ever assimilate?
No, I didn't. Since I was a kid, my family and I never left our culture. I learned Yiddish at a very young age. I celebrate traditional holidays, and I still visit my parents to be reminded of the reason I'm Jewish. I'm proud of my identity, and I never would have dreamed of letting it go. It's still hard for me to live in such a different place than where I grew up. I'm still adapting.
What do you think about the concept of assimilation and acceptance?
I think that it's a process that has happened for so long that it has become necessary. I mean, look at Jewish women in the USA, the Yankees, I think they call them. They completely assimilated to the American culture and were able to have great opportunities for them and their children. As well, Ecuadorians in the USA. They have found a way to assimilate and keep in touch with their Latino roots.
I don't agree with you. I know that sometimes it is completely necessary to assimilate in order to be accepted and have a better life, like in your case. But it's such a horrible process. People lose their identity and leave what makes them behind. And of course, there are cases where it's forced assimilation. For example, the forced assimilation of Native Americans proposed by George Washington and Henry Knox around the 1790s. They were forced to assimilate to modern America. They left their culture behind because they didn't have another option. Children were taken away from their parents and put into boarding schools where they were abused physically and mentally. They changed their names, they gave them new clothes. They took their identity completely, and a culture was almost completely lost.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I changed my mind. I agree with you. Assimilation is necessary in some cases, but it's definitely not something to be proud of. Besides, I just remember hearing something about two different ways of assimilation.
Oh, yes, the melting pot versus the salad bowl. Those are two assimilation theories. The melting pot refers to when many cultures come together and melt or merge into one big culture. The salad bowl theory refers to when people retain the unique aspects of their culture and just mix with other ones, not melt like in the melting pot.
I think we all agree that the salad bowl is much better. It allows assimilation, but each culture simply retains their identity and gets to know other culture.
Well, the melting pot has allowed other cultures to appear thanks to all of the cultures that merge together. That is a very good thing.
I'm not sure about that. If we look at the American melting pot, it's clear that the cultures that merge are lost completely. People just think that they have melted into America, but they simply disappear into an already established American culture.
I love how there's so much debate and many points of view in this podcast. It allows us to look at every perspective. Well, let's move on.
How different were your lifestyles? I mean, Tom, you lived in the city and assimilated to modern culture, living your roots in your past. And Oscar kept his full identity in a small village outside of Germany.
Our lifestyles were very different indeed. We may both be Jewish people that lived in pre-war Europe, but we have completely different identities. The way I was raised allowed me to study and become a lawyer. German Jews had a better opportunity at having good, well-rounded education than in any other country, and certainly than in rural areas.
I instead come from a long line of farmers and kosher meat purveyors. Nobody expected much from me, and that's the only reason I decided to come to Ecuador. I wanted an opportunity to be better, to have a good job, and to start a family. My family did always value education. Just because I lived in the country didn't mean that they didn't want the best for me, and they gave me everything they could.
It must been so hard for you, Oscar, to live a life with so little opportunity of success, don't you think, Francisco?
I completely disagree with you, Uriel. It must be extremely hard for both of you. Oscar had to make so many sacrifices to maintain his Jewish roots, and it must be very hard for them to limit such a crucial part of his identity, his religion, in order to be successful.
You're right, I'm sorry. Now I realize that this hasn't been easy for neither of you, leaving your country, your people behind.
Yes, it was very hard.
I have to say, it's still very hard, at least for me. There is so much discrimination and unfairness and inequality towards migrants that I don't know how I'm going to survive. We live in a society where people treat other people different based only on their identity. There is no diversity, or at least people don't want it anymore.
Then it really makes us ask ourselves if all members of society can be treated completely equal if they don't share the same identity.
This is a very interesting question. I think that it isn't easy for everybody to be treated equally, but it's possible.
I agree with you, Uriel. Nowadays, and in comparison with the past, our society has become so much more tolerant towards different identities. Obviously, there's still a long way to go, but I consider that complete equality towards many identities is possible.
I can't say I agree with you. I consider it impossible for everybody to be treated equally when there are so many people and so many different identities. You are right, we don't live in completely different society nowadays, but it's a society full of hatred and discrimination, especially to the minorities, to people with different identities.
And a society where very few identities rule, and if you don't assimilate, then you will be treated differently. I have been through this, it's my life experience. I didn't assimilate. I kept my identity and everybody treats me unequally. I don't expect Domi or any one of you to understand, to know how it feels. If you saw her, you wouldn't even know she is Jewish. We both have different identities, and it's evident that we aren't being treated equally.
Oscar is completely right. We don't really know what it means to have a different identity, and it's true that I've had more opportunities because I indeed changed my identity to fit in. That's why I did it. Subconsciously, I know that having such a different identity can ruin your life, even when it is what builds you.
Oh, that means we have 1 minute left. Any of you want to say something?
Just so that it's more clear, I would like to answer the question we proposed, in my opinion. I feel that it's almost impossible for everybody to be equal when there's so many different identities that are seen with such discrimination and negativity. I have been treated differently because I was brave enough to keep my religion and identity alive. That's all.
I would also like to add that this discussion really helped me understand the concept of assimilation better, and I do agree with Oscar. But I also feel that people underestimate the importance of assimilation. Take me, for example. If I hadn't assimilated, I would not be where I am right now. Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Dominique and Oscar, for being on the show and telling us your story and opening us to a new point of view. It was a pleasure to having you here.
It
Thank
was
you
a
for having
pleasure.
us.
See you next time on Migrant Tales.